Thanks very much, Ivan. I better check my subscription to Engineers Ireland, make sure I'm still an active member. I suppose, look, it's not lost on me that we've been here before. The CIF has been calling for the reform of the Public Works contract before and after its introduction back in 2007. The CIF has always believed that there's a better way to improve how we construct in Ireland without handing it over to the lawyers. So there is a real feeling today of Groundhog Day. Over the last 15 years, the CIF has made a number of detailed submissions to the GCC seeking reform. One in 2013, which was followed up by an international symposium. In 2015, we then issued our medium-term strategy calling for further reform. Until recently in 2021, the CECA initiated IDEO Analytics report looking into public tendering practices and their impact on delivering value in the construction sector. While over the years, some of the reforms have been made to the Bill of Quantities, named specialists and professional indemnity insurance, the CIF has continued to call for further essential reform. Unfortunately, the last few years, with Brexit and COVID, have impacted on the OGP's ability to deliver on its medium-term strategies of reform as actioned in 2016. As such, the last 15 years have been highly frustrating for the industry and damaging to the health and sustainability of the sector. We cannot await any longer. We need reform to happen now, which brings us here today, again calling for reform. So what's different this time? Let's take a more strategic look at what's actually happening in the country and the industry at this time. We are now in a much more competitive international market. Public clients are finding it harder to compete for construction contractors to carry out their work. Many Irish contractors are finding better commercial opportunities in the private sector or in export sectors. For example, from between 2001 and 22, some contractors have increased their exports by up to 20%, while domestically they have grown by less than 1%. Simply put, there are better commercial opportunities out there and more clients willing to take a partnership approach with construction contractors. The lack of an effective price variation clause in the public works contract is one of the key drivers of this change in behaviour. So why is it happening? Well, let's tease it out a bit. First of all, from a strategic perspective, let's agree on a few assumptions some of the panel members before me have already mentioned. It is in the government's interest to have a healthy and sustainable construction industry that can deliver on the National Development Plan, and the National Development Plan is critical because it sets out the type of infrastructure the country needs to deliver housing, better living spaces and communities, the Climate Action Plan, and commercial and economic growth. Without the essential infrastructure built by construction contractors, none of this can happen. And a healthy, vibrant construction industry is built on contractors who can make sustainable profit margins like other business sectors like ICT, manufacturing, and finance. Similar to these sectors, it is only with a healthy, sustainable profit margin that construction contractors will be able to invest in people, technology, and their business systems so that they can increase their productivity and attract more talent. However, there are a number of factors which do not support these assumptions. And the first one is many in this industry believe that it is not being treated as a business sector. It is almost an appendage to the general economy. Secondly, the uncertainty around the pipeline of work. The previous panel has already addressed this, so I won't spend time on it, other than to say that we need more upfront investment in design and planning of infrastructural projects, which will create a bank of projects that could be tapered into the industry on a sustainable way. The The third one is the public procurement process itself and the public works contract. All of these 4 points are interdependent and they must be dealt with in the whole. So let's look at the first one, the industry as a business sector. Construction contractors are a critical engine of our economic growth. They represent over 90% of construction output, or 26 billion euro, equivalent to 6% of GDP. They employ 144,000 workers and up to 240,000 indirectly. With statistics like this, the industry can only be viewed as a business sector in its own right. While this view has not always been taken by government, we are seeing greater collaboration through the Construction Sector Group and the Digital Adoption and Building Innovation Group. I most recently worked with the OGP on the COVID-19 and inflationary frameworks. However, we do need more engagement and active engagement from public authorities under the framework to get it moving and get cash flow into the industry. That's what it was put in place for. The construction contracting industry is an essential and equivalent business sector to manufacturing, pharmaceutical and ICT sectors. One that is highly complex, which delivers advanced solutions for Ireland's economic, social and climate challenges. And like these industries, the CIF's construction contractors also want to work in partnership with the government. And partnership means depoliticising the construction contractor sector, understanding and dealing with each other on fair terms by reducing uncertainty and managing risk fairly. This must mean the reform of the public procurement process and the contract itself. So looking at the procurement process, the way in which public authorities procure work is also impacting on constructors' commercial decisions. The IDERO Analytics report, which I referred to, found that there are several public tendering practices that might lead to an adversarial relationship between clients and contractors, generating project delivery issues and financial stress within the industry. The following points have been identified as the most critical ones amongst many issues with the public tendering process. Major lack of dialogue and client engagement pre-tender and during the tender process, unreasonable transfer of risk from clients to the contractor, low margins within the industry, and awarding based on lowest price instead of best value for money. The report also contains some concerning statistics supporting these points, which public clients need to be aware of. The report highlighted that 96%, for example, of civil engineering contractors believe contracts are awarded on lowest price. 86% say they're actually incentivizing below cost bidding. In terms of the risk margins, on average, contractors are only including 2.2% risk, with a third of respondents to the report saying they are applying zero or actually negative risk in their contracts to try and win. And finally, on the profit side of it, the report shows that the majority of construction contractors are only earning a margin of between 2 and 3% on public tenders. This low level of risk mitigation creates issues for these tenders when unexpected events materialise, such as inflation, supply chain problems, and ground risk. The report's results highlight that the current tender award system generates extreme price competition, where quality and technical skills are commonly ignored, leading to dangerous below-cost practices. And the impact of these practices is not only harmful for a contractor's solvency, but also the project itself and ultimately Housing for All and the National Development Plan. The report makes several recommendations on how to improve. Promotion of early engagement and collaboration, adopt a more flexible and modern contract, like the NEC, provide a complete project description where risks are identified and explained, promote multi-stage procurement, and encourage multi-criteria awards. So now that brings me on to the Public Works contract itself. One of the recommendations of the report was to use the NEC contract, But before we get into this recommendation, let's take a strategic look again at the industry and the challenges it's facing by doing a short pestle analysis. If we consider political factors, we're looking at increased likelihood and existing war, climate issues, housing and infrastructural deficits. From an economic perspective, we've high inflation, interest rate hikes, supply chain disruption, talent and skill shortages. From a society perspective, we have population growth, older society, health issues and pandemics. Technological perspective, we now have digital adoption, modern methods of construction, complex and high-tech systems being introduced into the construction sector to deliver better value built environment. And then on the environmental legislation side, we have sustainability and green procurement issues. So I think we can all agree that the construction industry is highly volatile right now and likely to be for the foreseeable future. This is a paradigm shift from 2007. We must therefore future-proof our public procurement and contracting system now before it's too late. Geopolitical pressures are making nationalism and war more likely, which will cause long-term structural problems within our supply chains, directly impacting on material costs for the long term. Green procurement in construction will be essential to deliver on climate legislation. But this will require projects to be procured on an output, quality and performance basis. All construction contracts will need to be output focused, based on whole life costs and embedded carbon. We are also starting to see much more advanced technology and complexity in the design of construction projects, with contractors taking on more design responsibility. For example, Metro North Bus Connects will be built through existing infrastructure, utilities and private property. The public procurement process and public works contract needs reform to deal with this level of uncertainty and the complexity of projects in the NDP. Unlike international forums like the NEC, it was ill-suited to manage the consequences of Brexit, COVID and war in Ukraine. Without the innovative efforts of the OGP, there would have been no supports for the construction contractor sector. Several reforms could make a significant difference in how the public works contract operates, particularly around the introduction of effective price variation clauses. Yes, they're not simple, but we need them. We need to strengthen the cooperation clause. We need better risk management around ground conditions, utilities and legislation. Legislative enactments that are brought in by public bodies and expecting the industry then to pay for them is simply not fair, and the definition of legislation needs to be broadened. But that's separate to taxing the industry for other issues, which might have unintended consequences and acting as multipliers right through the supply chain and could actually be cause greater damage to the NDP than the lack of reform of the public works contract. And we need to start giving that message back. Dealing with instructions and determination of contractors' notices. These simply can't be allowed to be ignored anymore. The introduction of liability caps will attract more contractors to consider public works contracts. And removing the programme contingency. I don't think there's any other contract, and I stand to be corrected, in the world that asks the taxpayer to pay for a delay that actually hasn't happened yet. In the National Development Plan, the Government and the OGP committed to the reform of the public works contract under these headings, and it is making some headway. In its recent budget submission, the CIF has called for the OGP to be given the support and resources necessary to deliver on its reform of the public works contract. Unfortunately, for many construction contractors, the reform is simply taking too long and must be faster, or it's just too late for them. Reform needs the political will, accompanied by sustained backing of senior civil servants, or we will see more and more construction contractors choosing to work with clients who wish to work in partnership rather than on a transactional approach. However, there is a shovel-ready solution already there in the form of the NEC4. The NEC is used in the UK, the EU and New Zealand, and many of our own Irish contractors are using it. The NEC contract is output-focused and designed to drive collaboration amongst parties, manage risk more effectively and fairly, better cost control, and incentivises performance. It is a controllable and viable alternative to the public works contract because it provides a suite of options for complex and well-defined projects, written in plain English and well understood. Now, let's not get away from ourselves. Construction contracting is a challenging industry, and the NEC contract won't change that reality. Nor will handing it over to the lawyers to make a Z-clause contract. However, what the NEC provides is the system to drive collaborative behaviour, cultural change, and improve outcomes for the state, taxpayer, and the construction contractor. So in conclusion, construction contractors are an economic engine vital to Ireland's future. A healthy and sustainable industry will be critical to the delivery of the National Development Plan. While we are in a volatile economic environment, we must still deliver the necessary infrastructure to support housing for all and Ireland's economic, social and environmental future. Bringing the public works process and contract in line with international norms like the NEC will be critical to achieving this. Thank you.